So recently, my younger brother sent me a message, a really short one, and it simply read, "You getting Alan Wake 2?" Alan Wake 2? I I totally forgot this game was coming out. I'm sure I saw it on like a game show, like a game reward show or something like that. But truth be told, I totally forgot this game was coming out. My attention has been squarely focused on uh, playing Tears of the Kingdom, latest Zelda release, and waiting for Final Fantasy 16 to drop in about a week. But Alan Wake 2, let me let me pull you back a little bit. Let's go back. God, it's 13 years, right, since the release of the first game. I walk into a GameStop. I'm 14 years old at this point in time, and I remember seeing this giant cardboard display for Alan Wake. It's pretty much just the box cover essentially, but it's like a pop out cardboard display. It's really cool, really cool. And when I was 14 years old, it caught my eye immediately. And you have to understand, me at 14, I didn't know anything about games. Like, like not really. I played video games, but I didn't know anything about the game industry, I think it would be more accurate to say. If I thought a game looked cool, I bought that game. That was pretty much as simple as it was. Didn't know about developers, publishers, anything like that. And I wasn't really reading game reviews or anything. The only game reviews I was reading was in Nintendo Power. And last time I checked, Alan Wake is not a Nintendo game, nor was it available on a Nintendo system until just recently, I believe, October 2022, where they put the remaster on Nintendo Switch. I was not a survival horror fan. To this day, I'm still not much of a survival horror fan. But there was just something about this game, the concept of shooting light on enemies in order to make them vulnerable and then attack them, that was just really interesting to me. Also, this idea that there's like a story written in it. I don't know. Just something about it really, really captured my imagination. So of course I had to get it. Now I didn't like it as much as a lot of other people did. I thought the writing was not the strongest. I can attest to it. I read the novelization. I purchased that on Kindle, and it's like poor man's Stephen King. And the gameplay was okay, but enemy variation was poor. Overall, it was just very repetitive. Okay, and I remember reviewers giving it 8s and 9s. Me, I'd be a little harsher on it. I'd say 7, 7.5. But nonetheless, it was a really interesting, really ambitious game. And now we fast forward to now, and we're getting Alan Wake 2. So you would think, based off of the first game getting only a 7 or a 7.5 from me, that I would be not that interested in Alan Wake 2. Especially considering the fact that I totally forgot it existed until my younger brother sent me a message. But that's not the case. In truth, I'm actually leaning towards buying this game. You see, I think Remedy has earned my purchase. I really think they have. I think reputation should count for something in the games industry. And Alan Wake 2, to me, I think is rather comparable. This might sound like a stretch, but allow me to explain it. To Armored Core 6, Fires of Rubicon. Gameplay-wise, they couldn't be further apart, of course. But you'll remember the last time we got an Armored Core from Software was 2012's. Actually, you know what? It was 2012. I was going to say 2012's Armored Core 5, but there was also Verdict Day, which I think came out in 2013, maybe. Either way, it was Armored Core 5. And since then, they've been putting out banger after banger after banger. We've been getting, since then? Dark Souls 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, and of course, it'd be remiss of me not to mention the big kahuna, Elden Ring. And since that time, it's been forever since we've got another Armored Core. Now we're getting Armored Core 6. And while Armored Core 5 was not the best game, It did not review all that well, and even fans of the series aren't particularly fond of it, especially when compared to Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer. There's a great optimism that Armored Core 6 is going to be a must-play entry in the series. And why is that? Because From Software's reputation has improved immensely over the years by putting out Game of the Year contenders or just straight-up games of the year over and over again. So now we're going to trust them when they go back to an old franchise, to their old stomping grounds, that they're going to put out something far greater than what they have before. That's what I'm expecting from Remedy here. I think Alan Wake 2 is going to be everything that Alan Wake could have been. I mean, just think about what Remedy has put out since then. They put out Quantum Break, I believe it was called. A rather interesting experimental game, tying together television with video games. That was always the big thing for Remedy. I think Alan Wake really started it. It was this idea of mixing mediums, putting a novelization, putting a novel into a game, putting a TV show into a game. And Control was its own, a whole other beast. But a really interesting story, excellent third-person shooter gameplay. Control was on most Game of the Year lists, and honestly well-deserved. Well-deserved. Because of those games, I feel inclined to give Alan Wake 2 a purchase. Now, you might be saying, hey, hold your horses. You should probably wait for reviews. You should probably wait for, more information before you make a pre-order or anything of the sort. And I think you're probably right. It's probably the more prudent thing to do. But I don't think you could blame me for putting my money down now. Let's think about another instance of a company that did enough to improve its reputation to a point where you should trust them on their next game, and it fell flat. Because if I'm saying that they deserve my purchase off of the reputation, and you're saying, hey, whoa, every game is an individual thing, right? You can't just say, well, if this was good and this was good, this is going to be good automatically. Well, let me play devil's advocate here. Let's go to Cyberpunk 2077. Now, before Cyberpunk, what was CD Projekt Red making? Well, they put out Witcher 2, Assassin of Kings. And that game was fantastic. And then they put out Witcher 3, Wild Hunt. And that game was phenomenal. Absolutely amazing. Excellent music. Excellent production values. One of the best stories I've ever played through in a video game. Superb gameplay. Got Game of the Year awards out the wazoo. Deserved each and every one of them. And then we got Cyberpunk. Now, I pre-ordered Cyberpunk. I really did. Because I trusted them on reputation that they had built up, goodwill that they had built up with me and with other gamers by putting out games of the year, one after the other. And what happened? It was a disaster. An absolute disaster. Game was broken, refunds all over the place, apologies put out, and even now, with the soon-to-be-released Phantom Liberty DLC, finally the dev team is saying this is going to be what the game was supposed to be all along. It's a reinvention. You're telling me years after the game came out, it's going to be at the state it should have been years ago. All that time, I thought you just needed maybe 6 more months, maybe a year. You needed years to get to the point you were promising us. So there's a risk. Reputation isn't everything. But I'm inclined, call me a fool, to believe that Remedy is actually going to deliver on this. And one thing I'm very excited for is that this is a different take on Alan Wake. Sam Lake, the creative director, is saying this is going to be a complete survival horror experience this time. Not an action, not a horror-themed action shooter. This is going to be a survival horror game proper. And while I'm not a giant fan of survival horror, I'm not a big fan of being scared, to be honest with you. I am intrigued, and that alone might be enough to pull me in. But I think reputation should matter in this industry. And I think Remedy has done enough to earn a purchase from me through reputation alone. But what do you think? Do you think Remedy's reputation is good enough to warrant a purchase? Or do you think I need to wait and see what the reviews say? Thank you for listening. I'll talk to you again soon.